Hello and welcome back to Root of Ramose, a poetry series in which we observe the mechanics, aesthetics, and meaning of the greatest founding text of the Western poetic tradition. Today we're continuing our textual analysis of the Epic of Gilgamesh by looking at Tablet 3. As I mentioned last time, I'm reading from the standard Babylonian version, He Who Saw the Deep, as translated by Andrew George. As always, there are timestamps for each topic in the description that you can use in order to navigate the video. If you have any questions throughout the course of the video, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started with the poetic analysis of Tablet 3. Alright, so in this first section, we have a continuation from the last tablet where Gilgamesh and Enkidu are speaking with the elders of Uruk. So we're going to look at what we can get out of their exchange. So the elders tell Gilgamesh to return to the key of Uruk. This could be seen as a kind of monument of safety. They tell him not to rely on his strength alone. This would obviously be in vain against Humbaba. Look long and hard, land a blow you can count on. There has to be some strategy to figure out in order to defeat Humbaba. They further provide their wisdom to Gilgamesh for his journey. It almost has a feeling or element of displaying divine knowledge. They continue on line 4. Who goes in front saves his companion. Who knows the road protects his friend. Let Enkidu go before you. He knows the journey to the forest of cedar. He is tested in battle and tried in combat. He shall guard his friend and keep safe his companion. Enkidu shall bring him safe home to his wives. So this passage shows us that Enkidu will be an invaluable companion for this journey, and with his help, Gilgamesh will be able to return home safely. I do think it's strange that they do mention multiple wives. Polygamy was considered rare during this time, even though it did happen. We do know that marriage was an institution promoted in order to maintain the birth rates of the society. More likely, what they're referring to here would be the concubines of Gilgamesh. At this point, they haven't mentioned Gilgamesh having a wife, and it's possible that he could have had one, but she wasn't relevant to the narrative, so she was just excluded. But one interesting thing I came across when I was researching was that there was a practice where the king and the priestess would have a sexual union as a ritual, and that the priestess was meant to be a symbolic representative of a goddess. That's just another interesting component of their religion and the practices of the kings of that era. We're going to now look at the next segment of the tablet involving Ninsun and her ritual. So Gilgamesh tells Enkidu to come with him to the Palace Sublime to visit Ninsun. As Gilgamesh put it, Ninsun is clever and wise, well-versed in everything. She will set our feet in steps of good counsel. And then again in unison, they go together. Gilgamesh enters and speaks to Ninsun. Here we have a repeat of what he had told the citizens at the end of Tablet 2. And here he lets Ninsun know of his plan for his journey, and asks for her to bless him so that he may have a safe return to Uruk. Let's look at how Ninsun responds, starting on line 35. Wild cow Ninsun listened long and with sadness to the words of Gilgamesh, her son, and Enkidu. In the bathhouse she went 7 times. She bathed herself in water of tamarisk and soapwort. So the first thing I want to point out is that we have a portrayal of humanity given to the goddess Ninsun. In spite of her emotional feelings, she doesn't act out of emotion, but she carries out a ritual with intention. She begins her ritual, and the details they provide are specific. She goes into the bathhouse 7 times. Now, while it hasn't yet been explicitly determined why the number 7 carries this deep spiritual weight, it nonetheless is understood that Babylonians considered 7 to be a mystical number of spiritual importance. And we've already seen it mentioned several times within this epic so far, when it mentioned the 7 sages that laid the foundation of Uruk's brickwork, and Shamash and Enkidu coupling for 7 days and 6 nights. There is some spiritual weight and divine power ascribed to the number 7. Now, looking at where it mentions that she used tamarisk and soapwort, we can see these objects also hold a particular purpose and meaning for Ninsun's ritual. We know that tamarisk would typically grow in areas between the elevation of the cedars in the mountains and the palm trees near human habitation. The tamarisk actually releases a salt into the soil, and this prevents other plants from being able to thrive in its vicinity. The tamarisk could also provide shelter from the elements, a sweet nectar for food, and collected rainwater from its branches. It is a very self-sustaining tree, and it could be seen as a symbol of protection. The salt it secretes could also be seen as representing purification. As for the soapwort, it has a few known uses. Soapwort has been known to be used for cleansing and softening the skin, along with cleaning the hair, and it could also be used medicinally to help against respiratory infections like bronchitis, and it does so by thinning the congestion to make it easier to expel what's ever in your system. I think that tamarisk and soapwort are represented in this context in order to demonstrate Ninsun's cleansing and purification process. She carries on with the ritual as follows. She donned a fine dress to adorn her body. She chose a jewel to adorn her breast. Having put on her cap, she donned her tiara. The harlots, the ground. Here, Ninsun is meticulously selecting how she is adorning herself. Everything that she is using is selected in order to prepare for the communion with a deity. Unfortunately, because the text is fragmented, I'm not sure what exactly happened with the harlots. Now we're going to move on to the next section of the ritual. She climbed the staircase and went up to the roof. On the roof she set up a censer to Shamash. Scattering incense, she lifted her arms in appeal to the sun god. Why did you afflict my son Gilgamesh with so restless a spirit? So here, she is ascending to the highest point in order to speak to the sun god Shamash. Elevation is often synonymous with divinity, represented in such a way over and over and over again, all throughout sacred texts as well as in literature. And this is because divinity is believed to live in the firmament. This is just a common association that has been made, and we see it made even here. Additionally, she is using incense as an offering in the hopes to raise her voice for the divine to hear. Finally, we can see with her arms lifted, directing all her focus of her words and now even her body, she is begging to be heard. And this is when Ninsun begins to petition Shamash, asking why Gilgamesh is afflicted with so restless a spirit. In the following 2 stanzas, there are 3 lines of particular importance when it reveals an insight. First, where it states, "For now you have touched him," and then, "until he slays ferocious Humbaba and annihilates from the land the evil thing you abhor." So here, there is a recognition of the spiritual nature of Gilgamesh's desires, that they are rooted in an influence from Shamash, the sun god. This demonstrates that there is a spiritual order that exists and then is manifested on earth by agents in the physical realm. This has occurred more subtly in the text leading up to this point, but here, these lines are overtly explaining the spiritual view of the Sumerian people, that they saw the actors of the people as an extension or as conduits of and for gods and goddesses. And so Ninsun is asking Shamash to protect Gilgamesh on his journey. She carries on with a very dense appeal to Shamash. And I will just sort of briefly touch on just a few of the points, just because there is so much to unpack here. There is a mention of the watchers of night and the gates for the herd to go out. For you came forth for the land, the uplands took shape, the heavens grew bright, and the beasts of the wild, your ruddy glow. Here she is appealing to what Shamash has already done and his works of creation. This may be done to show respect of his power, and it may also be done to entice the god to act in Ninsun's favor. She continues, "At the coming forth of your light is gathered the crowd, the divine Anunnaki await your brilliance." You may be familiar with the name Anunnaki. That's typically what people bring up when they talk about, oh, the aliens, the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were divine beings of fate, and they were believed to have been made from Anu and Kai, so the sky god as well as the earth god. So Ninsun is mentioning the divine Anunnaki awaiting Shamash's brilliant. She then mentions Aya the bride. Aya functions primarily as a goddess of light, and she is the known wife of the sun god. And so Ninsun is using familial relationships in order to persuade action of Shamash. And she's going so far as to even ask Aya to entrust Shamash to look after Gilgamesh. And so there's this dynamic of family members trying to persuade other family members in order to get what they want. And throughout this section, there's a great deal of anaphora, and it's almost like a gentle command with let him pinch, let nighttime, let the days be long, let his loins be girt. It creates this rhythm, it creates almost a sense of an affirmation or a manifestation or an incantation. One of the more interesting appeals that Ninsun makes to Shamash is to ask him to summon the 13 mighty gale winds. And so we have south wind, north wind, east wind, west wind, blast, counterblast, typhoon, hurricane, tempest, devil wind, frost wind, gale, and tornado. I think it is so interesting that they've conceived of so many distinct entities to represent the varying conditions of the natural force of wind. And this provides a perspective of respect for nature, that each kind of wind was created to serve an intended purpose for the gods. Also, when she asks for help of the mighty gale winds, it almost seems to allude to the imagery of making Humbaba fall like a cedar tree in a storm. Ninsun then continues, "After your very own fires are kindled, at that time, O Shamash, turn your face to the supplicant," meaning turn your face to the one petitioning, suggesting that Shamash has reward awaiting him for protecting Gilgamesh against Humbaba. The next stanza clarifies what Shamash has to gain. He will have glad service of others, rest, food to delight in, and Aya the bride to take care of him. So again, it's so interesting to see how the story presents the relationship between divine beings and their tactics of persuasion and reasoning. After presenting to Shamash what he has to gain from helping, Ninsun then asks him to consider what will happen if he doesn't assist Gilgamesh. And it carries on in the next two stanzas. Will he not? As if suggesting if Gilgamesh fails against Humbaba, that he will not be able to share in heaven, the moon, and things of that nature. So here, Ninsun is appealing to fate and the divine right that she wants for Gilgamesh as a reason to provide his safe passage while he is serving Shamash. And then finally, we have the end of her ritual prayer to Shamash. And look at how it concludes. She smothers the censer and came down from the roof. So here, she is no longer sending her words up to the heavens, and she descends from the rooftop to come back down to the worldly domain. Ninsun then summons Enkidu and declares her will. O mighty Enkidu, you are not sprung from my womb, but henceforth your brood will belong with the votaries of Gilgamesh, the priestesses, the Hyridules, and the women of the temple. She put the symbol on Enkidu's neck. Here when they say your brood, I believe it has a dual meaning. Brood here could be referring to Enkidu's focus and concern belonging to those who are also devoted to Gilgamesh, or it could be referring to Enkidu as a brood, as in a young member of the family, this family being the members of the temple and the ones devoted to Gilgamesh, being the priestesses, the prostitutes, and the women of the temple. From what I could find in ancient Mesopotamia, brands and tattoos were inflicted on slaves as a means of either marking human or divine ownership. In this context, I don't think it has to do with Enkidu becoming a slave to the temple, but rather that because he was an orphaned creation, this is him being inducted into the temple. And as the text explains to us, we see that Enkidu is being adopted by Ninsun and is now spiritually tied to that temple. There seems to be another ritual performed between Gilgamesh and Enkidu, but it's unclear what it involved because the tablet is so fragmentary, other than by the command of Shamash you will attain your desire, and in the gate of Marduk, and on the breast of the water, and Enkidu, at 20 leagues you should break bread. While we can't determine much from this fragmentary passage, we can see that both Gilgamesh and Enkidu are given a task to complete for their journey. There is then a declare of some sort. During the days of our journey, there and back, until we reach the forest of cedar, until we slay ferocious Humbaba and annihilate from the land the evil thing that Shamash abhors, may you acquire no. And then further elaborates in the next stanza. The officers must not assemble young men in the street, judge the lawsuit of the weak, seek out, while we attain our desire like babes in arms, and plant our weapons in Humbaba's gate. Here it seems as though there is a request being made to halt the usual practices of daily life regarding matters of justice until Humbaba has been defeated, as if to suggest that no justice can be obtained until the representative evil that is Humbaba is destroyed. This may also be a way of encouraging the citizens to remember and bless Gilgamesh on his journey. So again, we see a telling of the advice given to Gilgamesh for the journey he must take to be successful, and a request to Enkidu to carry out his duty to protect Gilgamesh. This repetition provides a sense of connectivity and unification for this entire tablet, and amongst the people of Uruk and the divine powers. Next, we have two overlapping tablets accounting Enkidu's response, and they differ a little bit between the two. Still, after all of these rituals and preparation, in the first tablet, Enkidu responds, "My friend, turn back. Do not pursue this journey." But then with the old Babylonian Yale tablet, we have a different account. He seems much more assured of himself, and he's not trying to turn Gilgamesh away from the journey. And it says the following: Enkidu opened his mouth, saying to Gilgamesh, "Where you've set your mind, begin the journey. Let your heart have no fear, keep your eyes on me. In the forest I know his lair, and the ways too, that Humbaba wanders. Speak to the crowd and send them home. They should not go with me." To you, the crowd with happy heart, they heard what he had said. The young men made a fervent prayer. "Go, Gilgamesh, may your God go before you. May Shamash let you attain your goal." Gilgamesh and Enkidu went forth. So it's interesting, the comparison of the two tablets, that in the first one, Enkidu is just trying to prevent Gilgamesh from going on the journey. And then in the next tablet, he is convincing Gilgamesh not to bring anyone with them and to send the crowd away, to send them home. The last thing I thought was interesting was that Gilgamesh has both Shamash and Enkidu going ahead of him for this journey to Humbaba. It's mentioned in both scenarios. And really it demonstrates that Gilgamesh needs the help of others in order to complete this journey. Everything that's accounted in Tablet 3 really does feel like a mark of a journey, that they're acquiring the assets needed in order to take on Humbaba through these rituals, through the wisdom and knowledge and the help of divinity in order to accomplish this journey. And that is the end of Tablet 3.